Good afternoon, and on behalf of the University of New Mexico Taos branch, we welcome you to our public forum where we will have the opportunity to meet and speak with our Chancellor candidate, Dr. Christopher Villa. So good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started, it looks like everyone has their microphones on mute. Thank you so much. We appreciate those of you that have your cameras on so Dr. Villa can see who he is speaking with this afternoon. We'll have other folks joining us as we go along, and we will be admitting them as they come in. We are recording today's session, so if any of you are opposed to having your image or voice recorded, you are welcome to turn off your video and your microphone at this time. We will be accepting questions. You can submit that via the chat to me, Anita Bringas, the host of this Zoom session. I'll also post my cell phone number and email address. You're welcome to submit questions via either of those formats as well. We'll have just about an hour for this session. As I mentioned, the session will be recorded and will be posted online, as well as will be a feedback survey that we really encourage everybody who's participating in these sessions to submit your feedback through that survey, as Provost Holloway will be reviewing them as he makes his final decision for our next chancellor. So without further ado, it is my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome and introduce our Chancellor candidate, Dr. Christopher Villa. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Anita, for the nice introduction. And thank you, folks, for participating in this open forum. I really appreciate you taking the time and effort to get to know me and to give me the opportunity to answer your questions. So let me start off with an introduction. And I'm noticing that there are a couple folks who were in the last session who are participating in this session. So please forgive me if I sound a bit repetitive, but I'll share with you some things about myself. I'd like to let you know that I am sincerely interested in this position for a number of reasons, but let me come back to my personal background and tie that into my interest. I am from a family that comes from northern Mexico, from the state of Sonora, Mexico. And it's a family of ranchers. And I'd say about a third of my family is still based over there doing ranching in a small town called Pumpa, Sonora. And that has left an imprint on our family and our extended family, especially in the United States. So what my family did, my parents actually immigrated from northern Mexico through Arizona and ended up in Southern California. And that was about 100 years ago. My father came here as an undocumented person, and he got his documentation by virtue of serving in the military. He saw action in World War II in the Philippines and New Guinea. I'm very proud of his association with the military and being a veteran. So I come from a family that's truly got a Mexican cultural background and also a background that's affiliated with our American culture. And I do believe that that has helped me better understand what's going on in this country and what's going on in our communities with respect to issues that pertain to trying to elevate the opportunities and the success of people who live in our communities. When I lived in Southern California, I grew up in East Los Angeles, and many of the young people I grew up with were not successful in high school. Many dropped out, and many did not fully participate in the educational system for a lot of different reasons. Many folks have argued, and I support these arguments, that because of forms of systemic racism and marginalization, they just didn't feel valued, and they didn't feel like they wanted to fully participate in our educational system. These are issues that occurred back then and still occur now. So I'm fully cognizant on a personal level of how important it is to be engaged with as many people as possible, whether they're young or whether they're older adults, to help them be connected to our branch campus here at UNM-Taos. I do believe from my own personal experience that we can make a significant difference, and we continue to do this in the lives of people who tend to be marginalized. So I, as your chancellor, will come in with a perspective in which I fully acknowledge and understand on a personal level what many of our folks are struggling with respect to participation in higher education. I also want to share with you some of my experience. I have over 35 years of experience in higher education, at both the university and community college level. My experience is about evenly distributed between Research One universities and comprehensive universities like the University of Utah and also the California State University system, but it's also balanced with about 18 years of experience in community colleges. And I've been at almost every level that you can think of in terms of position in higher education. I've been a frontline classified staff for about 9 years. So I think I have a good handle on understanding of the issues, many of the issues that our classified staff experience. I've been a dean, I've been a vice president, and I recently concluded a 2-year stint as president at Portland Community College, Rock Creek. I know what it's like to teach. I've been a part-time faculty at Cal State University Northridge, teaching courses in educational leadership and policy. So a particular interest and insight with respect to instruction, but especially from the part-time perspective, having been a part-time instructor myself at the university level. I am strongly empathetic with respect to people who are considered disadvantaged in our systems of education. So should I be selected as your chancellor, I want to share with you that based on my own life experience and based on my experiences of having worked in a number of equity programs, that I will be very equity oriented in my role as chancellor. And I will work with our management team and we will do great things together, working with all of you as faculty, staff, and community members to identify what our priorities should be for this campus. As you know, there's a strategic plan that was in place from 2014 to 2019. So one of the first priorities I'll address as your chancellor is to update the strategic plan. And that strategic plan will be developed with extensive consultation with all of you as community members and as members of the faculty, staff, and students of this particular campus. So, and then I guess on a personal level, in terms of hobbies, I love nature and I like hiking a lot. I like to explore different places in terms of nature. So this is a major reason why I'm interested in relocating our family here. I know the area really well. I visited New Mexico a number of times, but I will share this. I've seen it from the perspective of a tourist, but not as a person who's lived here. And I understand that should I be in this position, I'll be very respectful of the cultures, the great cultures that exist here. And I'll learn a lot from all of you in terms of being as effective as possible in addressing what our priorities will be for this campus in the future. And also on a personal level, I like music a whole lot. And I have a hobby of collecting music, and I have probably about 3,000 songs in different playlists. And I use that for relaxation purposes, because as you might know, many of us are already stressed out as faculty and staff working in higher education, especially under these circumstances with the pandemic. But administrators also experience a lot of stress. So that's one way I relieve my stress, by listening to music. So anyway, should I be selected as your chancellor, I'll probably want to, for those of you interested in music in particular, we'll probably have some conversations about your musical interest. So, and that's a little bit about me. And now I'll stop at this point and field any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Villa, for that introduction and opening statement.
Okay.
Before we get started with our first question, I do want to acknowledge and thank several community members for joining us today. We have District Attorney Marcos Montoya with us. Thank you so much for joining us. We also have 2 county commissioners that are with us today, Candace O'Donnell and Darlene Behill. Good afternoon, commissioners, and thank you for being with us as also. And please do, if you have any questions or comments for Dr. Villa, please don't hesitate to submit those. So we'll go ahead and start with the first question, which is, what is your leadership style and how do you envision your first 6 months at UNM-Taos?
My leadership style is really reflective of my personality. And I think anyone who answers this question would have to infuse their own personality with respect to a leader. You have to be authentic, I believe. And you have to really demonstrate that this is who you really are, and this is what you bring to the table. And hopefully it works for this college or this entity, wherever it is that you may work. So I'll address the issue of leadership style, but I'll say a few things about what I learned about myself in getting feedback from folks I work with, from people I value highly in terms of their feedback. What people will say about me is that he's a very caring leader who really is empathetic and really is concerned about the welfare of people around him. In many instances, I would be placed in the category of being a servant leader, one who goes out of his way to really listen to people and to try to solve problems. It's my nature to do that. That's just the way I am. So in terms of a style, I want to share with you that that is something that you're going to pick up right away. People will say he's kind of laid back, he's kind of low key, but I want to share with you that that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not able to make decisions which are difficult. I think that's part of the nature of being in an administrative leadership position, like the chancellor position, and I've done that. I believe heavily in accountability. I believe in making myself accountable to you and having my own goals and objectives, which need to be measured. And I do believe in adhering to any practices within HR to do meaningful evaluations of our faculty and staff so that they can improve their performance. And I don't mean to infer that there are performance issues here at UNM-Taos. I just want to utilize processes so that we can all look at our strengths and weaknesses and make ourselves even more effective, whether it's in the classroom or outside the classroom. So in terms of leadership style, count on me to be someone who's going to be very supportive and positive and the #1 cheerleader for UNM-Taos out in the community and certainly on campus. Well, maybe, yeah, I'd say it's expected that I'd be the #1 cheerleader, right? And it's expected that I work with you in a very constructive, meaningful way in which I solicit your input, I receive the input, and then we make decisions as a group. So in terms of leadership style and management style, that's how I work. It's worked for me. And I admit in some places it may not work for those campuses or those colleges, but that's what I bring to the table. So during my first 6 months, a lot of you administrators will say, well, I'm going to conduct a listening tour. Yes, I'll conduct that. I'm going to do a lot of listening. I'm going to have to do a lot of transition with respect to understanding the confluence of the cultures here, which are in some instances could be interpreted as being very complex. And I have a lot of learning to do with respect to learning about the whole area, but I can assure you that I'm going to spend a lot of time here. I'm going to live in the area. I'm going to be fully engaged with our local communities, representatives. We have 2 commissioners in this group. I can tell you right now from my experience at Portland Community College Rock Creek, I was very much involved with our local commissioner that oversaw our region in which my college was located. In fact, she's one of my references. And I'm going to share with you that in terms of leadership style in my first 6 months, I'm going to be very engaged in working with all of you to try to identify what our priorities should be for this campus and have those priorities identified and placed in our strategic plan. And in that strategic plan, I expect those priorities to be measured so that we show improvement in our outcomes. I believe in being accountable. I have no fear of looking at data and using it to improve the performance outcomes for our students. So that's my answer to your question. And I'll stop at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Villa. You're very effective at anticipating additional questions that are coming up the queue. You've spoken to this a little bit, but we'll give you an opportunity if you have anything else to share specifically. The question is, how do you measure the performance of staff, especially senior leadership members?
Mm-hmm. I like to be in an environment where we're assessing outcomes for different departments or units at a college or a campus. That's why I do believe in program review. And program review, as you probably know, is the opportunity for a department, whether it's a faculty department or a student services or administrative unit department, to determine what it is that it does well and what it is that it can improve on, and then what it is that we can do to identify priorities for that department that need to be funded in the future. The tendency now for many colleges, from my experience, is that with program review, typically the program review process was a 3 to 4 or 5 year process where you wouldn't come up with program review. You would have a plan for 3 years. I think that's okay, but realistically, especially with the pandemic as an example, we need to have annual, call it what you want, annual program review or annual process where we measure our efficacy in achieving success. So I do believe it's really important in working with managers, a leadership team, to, in the context of program review, expect them to conduct program reviews on a regular basis. Regular could be, it depends on our group. I'll listen carefully to our managers and also our faculty and classified staff leaders to determine the time frame. But I do recommend not having a full-blown program review annually. That's too much work. But a more abbreviated program review where every department is responsible for identifying its priorities within the context of the strategic plan, and where it can identify through certain measurements, whether they're quantitative or qualitative, and certain outcomes are being achieved. An example would be, are we showing improvement in student success course completion rates, let's say, in your particular department? Or are we seeing within a CTE area, if in fact the placement rate of students is reaching a desired percentage? And it's not just quantitative, it's also qualitative. I think it's important to survey our students and get their perspectives on different departments. The reason why I'm saying all of this is because managers, in many instances, supervise multiple departments. So my expectation would be that our managers, our leadership management team, would be held accountable for ensuring that there's an annual process in place to measure the efficacy of departments that report to them or units that report to them. And I know this all sounds mechanical and it sounds maybe a bit impersonal. I don't intend to make it sound that way, but if we're going to improve outcomes in general for our students with respect to transfer or certificate completion, I know you've had some significant improvements in outcomes. I've read about that, but if we're going to continue to measure them, we need to hold our managers accountable for having their units that report to them, providing us this data on a regular basis. So when it comes to evaluating managers, I'll be looking at that, and along with other measures that are in place. I don't know if you do 360 reviews of managers. I'm not saying I would support that. I have mixed feelings about 360 reviews, but the bottom line is that I will ask about what processes are in place to do evaluations for our management team and get their feedback in terms of what they think we should do, and then ultimately make modifications as necessary. But what I just shared with you will influence my thinking with regard to evaluating their performance. That is to make sure that annually we're assessing the efficacy of departments that report to them.
Excellent, thank you so much. So the next question, how would you go about working with and advocating to the legislature the importance of our small branch campus to the Northern New Mexico community? And I would add to that, given that we have several county representatives with us today,
Sure.
Perhaps broadening that response to how would you work with our community partners, municipalities, public-private partnerships in that same way?
Yeah. One of the first things I would do is depend on initially key people who are associated with the UNM-Taos campus, primarily from I think the advisory council. And I know you have a couple of representatives that I met today for lunch. One of them is Jim Sanborn, who also serves on the board of, I think, the Taos School District. So I would rely on folks like him and some of you to advise me on who to build relationships with in order to maximize opportunities to provide more funding and more support for the UNM-Taos campus. Having been a campus president in Oregon, I did this. I found out who I need to work with within the first 6 months or so. I got advice from from key people like yourselves in the community in terms of who to work with in order to be as effective as possible in using my time to help, in this case, Portland Community College Rock Creek. So that's one of the first things I would like to do. I would consult with you and get ideas with respect to who to work with, whether it's in the K-12 or in the private sector or in government. As a result of that, based on my experience at PCC Rock Creek, from the campus president, or in this case, the campus chancellor position, I then would reach out to key individuals. And I do believe that I'm really effective in building relationships, positive relationships with key people. And I had that opportunity to do that at Portland Community College Rock Creek. I was able to build relationships with local government officials. I knew the mayors of Beaverton and Hillsborough, which are neighboring cities to my campus at Rock Creek in Portland. And those were constructive relationships, very helpful to our college. We were able to sustain funding from local cities to support an equity program called Future Connect. And this was not a small sum of money. Of course, that area is fairly well healed. It's considered a Silicon Forest of Oregon. In other words, companies like Intel and Nike are based within a 15-20-minute drive of the Rock Creek campus. But I used my leverage from my position to get more funding from key entities to support our college. And I used these relationships that I developed with local government officials and statewide legislators to secure more funding, along with 18 other college presidents in Oregon. And we increased our base funding for community colleges in Oregon from $570 to $640 million. That was a team effort. So I know what it's like to build these relationships, and it's critical that I do so. So my style would be to listen to some of you as key individuals in the community and help guide me in terms of how I should prioritize my time and who I should spend it with to maximize opportunities for UNM-Taos. I'll give you a perfect example. So Pam Treese, who is a commissioner in Washington County, Oregon. Washington County is the second largest county in the state of Oregon, the fastest growing county in the whole state. It's surpassing Multnomah County, where Portland, the city of Portland, is located. So Pam and I connected very well, and we were able to do some problem solving for the Portland Community College Rock Creek campus, specifically as it pertained to an issue that had to do with the main entrance to the campus. Basically, without going into detail, I know what it's like to work with county commissioners to try to do problem solving in which the mutual interests of the county, and in this case, the campus, come together and we do it. So we were able to solve a problem that had to do with the main entrance to the campus, in which we had to expand the entrance from a 2-lane road to a 4-lane road with signals, with lights, right? So let me just share with you that I have experience in doing this. I have experience going to Salem. In this case, I would go to Santa Fe, advocating for UNM-Taos. But I know the key behind all of this is building these relationships with legislators, with key people in the community, our county commissioners, our school district folks. And I just want to say this, I thoroughly enjoy doing this. It's not a chore for me. It's something I like. I like building these relationships because what we're doing is we're doing something really good. We're trying to do everything possible to maximize what we offer here at UNM-Taos to benefit the citizens who live in the community.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And that segues very well into the next question,
Okay.
which is what program or degree would you like to see at UNM-Taos start to offer that is not currently being offered, and why?
Very good question, because I've done research at the campus, and I want to be careful in sharing with you what my thoughts are, because I don't have a full picture, right? Because if I mention a degree or certificate program, it might stir up some concern with certain individuals who are associated with UNM-Taos, and that you might think that this is like the only thing I'm thinking about. This is only here. So let me just say, I'm going to say this, but with a big asterisk, that I don't have the full picture. I haven't consulted extensively with the faculty here, with the staff, and with our community. So I'm kind of, I don't want to sound like I'm being kind of chicken about the answer, but I'll share with you what my thoughts are. So I've been reading the papers, and I know that in the state of New Mexico, we have significant investments that are supposed to happen with respect to the expansion of Netflix and the expansion of Intel in the Albuquerque area. It made me think about, especially in the area of technology, what we could do to expand opportunities for our local citizens to get entry-level jobs that are associated with a major corporation like Intel. In Portland, Oregon, about 15-20 minutes from our campus at Portland Community College Rock Creek, Intel has a facility which is phenomenal. It's the largest facility. It's one of the largest facilities that Intel has in the world, and it employs 20,000 people. It's a #1 employer of folks in Oregon. So when I got to PCC Rock Creek, we had already developed a microelectronics program in which we were able to utilize support from Intel in the form of equipment and some funding to support that particular program. That came to mind right away. However, I'm also aware that one doesn't necessarily have to earn an AA or AS degree to prepare themselves for a tech-oriented degree. And not only that, as I learn more about UNM-Taos, I know that there's a strong desire to have people who participate at UNM-Taos to stay in UNM-Taos, right? To be employed here, to do things, good things for people who live here. So while I might be advocating initially for something like that, the expansion of curriculum that will focus on technology, I have to take into account other factors that come into play here. With regard to digital media, of course, with Netflix expanding its resources in the future, I know we have a strong digital media program here. I'd be interested in possibly considering expansion of it, but I don't know. So those things come to mind. So I'm looking for ways in which there are economic opportunities that we could take advantage of in Taos that could expand our curriculum. There's also a need for more, in everywhere I've worked, there's also a need to expand our focus on allied health. And I know in almost every place I've been, there's been a shortage of nurses or allied health professionals. So I'd be interested in looking at the whole allied health operation here and to see if there are opportunities to develop new allied health programming or curriculum that will fulfill not only short-term, but a long-term need. So those things come to mind when I think about new programming that could serve the folks who live in this area.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And staying on that same topic, if you can speak specifically to career technical education or both tech courses and programs and workforce development, and any thoughts that you have or ideas about building on and expanding those programs.
Sure. So I'll reveal a bias I had for many years. I started my career working at universities. So when I made the entree into community colleges about 20 years ago, I felt strongly that transfer degree was by far the #1 priority for community colleges. It still is. It's still a significant high priority for us. After all, we do want many of our students to transfer and pursue bachelor's degrees in graduate school ultimately, with the hopes that they'll come back to the Taos region and contribute to our economy here. But over time, and you've all seen this, that nationally, statewide, regionally, there's been a greater emphasis on CTE, career technical education. So having been in the California Community College system for about 16 years and then about 2 years in Portland, and certainly from the vantage point of a campus president, I can say with confidence that CTE programs are right there on par, just as important in terms of our focus when it comes to community colleges. And so is workforce development. And I really didn't have the opportunity to sink my teeth in depth in CTE because my career trajectory was primarily, or is primarily in the student services area, not in CTE. But I'm telling you, as a campus president, you need to be on top of your CTE. And I had the opportunity to be overseeing 14 CTE programs at Portland Community College Rock Creek. And these programs were all very active, and we were expanding those programs. The reason why I think CTE is so important now is because things have changed in our society. You know, about a few months ago, I've been talking to family members who are younger, who are like in the Generation X or Z group, and they're thinking about higher education has changed. In my generation, and for some of you in the audience, the traditional thinking was that go to college, get a bachelor's degree, get a master's degree, and do what you can to make a career with that. And certainly the data does show that earnings power of folks who have BA degrees or BS degrees and master's degrees or doctorates is higher compared to other folks. But that's changing. Folks who get certificates or get training are in many instances on par with getting close to income levels that folks get with bachelor's degrees and master's degrees and so on. So thinking has changed, I think, with this generation of younger folks who perceive college differently as not just the means to get that AA or AS degree, but that means to get a good paying job after enrolling at the community college. So with the 14 programs we had at Rock Creek, we did some interesting things. We had we still have a diesel technology program, and we were able to get support from the district office to construct a brand new electric power generation building to support our diesel technology students. There are fields like that, and like aviation, mechatronics, certainly allied health fields, where you can start and your earnings power will be at about the $40,000 to $50,000, $60,000 range, depending on the region that you're in. And in many of these instances, without the bachelor's degree, you can come close to earning six figures now in some of these areas. Our younger folks have figured that out. So I don't think there's necessarily such a great interest in pursuing degrees like there has been in the past, or bachelor's degrees. With that in mind, I think within the context of UNM-Taos, I come in with that thinking that let's look at our existing CTE programs and see which ones can expand and which ones might have to contract. And by the way, I want to say this. I do believe CTE programs fulfill the needs of our people. And not everybody wants a high-paying job. Everybody wants a high-paying job. But not everybody's desires end up getting training for a high-paying job. For instance, if you go into culinary or you go into early childhood education, you know up front, you're not going to get compensated at the same level as perhaps getting a degree or certificate in aviation science. So with that in mind, I'm interested in reviewing what we have in CTE programs. I love our CTE faculty. They work so hard in building strong relationships with their cohorts of students. I admire the work that they do. I respect the fact that many of our CTE programs have advisory groups, and we need to listen to those advisory groups carefully in helping us shape the curriculum and updating it to benefit our students in these programs. And we know the success rates are tremendously high with students in these programs, up to 90, 95, and sometimes, in some cases, 100% successful in having folks complete these degrees or these certificates. So I'm also interested in other opportunities. For instance, when I was reading about the infusion of funding that we expect Netflix to bring in to the Albuquerque area, I was able to read that there will be a whole lot of construction jobs that'll be connected to that infusion of money, assuming it happens. But we have a construction management program here, and I'd be interested in thinking about what we can do to expand that program, if in fact, this is what's really going to happen. If there are going to be jobs available in construction in the future in New Mexico, I'd be interested in looking at curriculum, working with our faculty, working with our other chancellors to be strategic and expanding the pool of people we train to get these good paying jobs. The ongoing issue, what I'm learning about this campus in particular, is a strong desire. I keep hearing that folks who are from Taos want our students to stay in Taos. And I think this is going to be an ongoing issue for us as a group. What is it that we can do to maximize opportunities for our students and somehow enable them to stay in the area within the context of what I've said? And that will be on my mind as your chancellor and listening to all of you and trying to figure out what we ought to do with respect to the expansion of our CTE programs.
Thank you, Dr. Villa. This is a topic that our campus and our community are very interested in. There's one more question that's come in aligned with what we've been talking about, but specifically about an agricultural program, an agricultural curriculum, and what your thoughts are about adding or expanding that program and how to incorporate it in our existing dual enrollment program with the local high school students.
So I have some familiar with agricultural programs, having worked at Cal Poly Pomona for a number of years, having been at Fresno City College. So I would like to review what is going on with the economy with respect to agriculture in this region and identify what our needs are in working in tandem with our community representatives, our community leaders, whether they're in government or in the private sector, and to try to figure out what we can do to provide creative opportunities to expand any efforts that are agriculture related. A lot of folks think that agriculture is, well, I'm fully aware that agriculture is a fascinating field. In the state of California, agriculture is the #1 employer still of all sectors. I believe it's still #1. It's near the top. And what's happening in agriculture, it's been happening for years, has been a shift in that many of the farms are being consolidated and people are losing, well, an agricultural lifestyle because of the way the economy is working. But what remains to be true is that there's a lot of innovation happening with agriculture, especially in the area of technology. And I'd like to better understand what's happening in this community with respect to any businesses that are working with ag. And if there's an opportunity to build a certificate program or at least a series of courses that can address that issue in relationship to technology, I would be interested. But I'd have to learn from you. I'd have to do more research and moving forward in that realm. So I just want to assure you that if that's the thinking in the community, that we could expand on any agriculture related curriculum, I'm fully open to that. I know our campus leadership will be open to it. Our faculty, I would assume, will be open to it. And certainly if we can fulfill a need that's in the area of agriculture, we'll likely address that and hopefully meet it in the future here.
Excellent, thank you so much. So in the discussion around expanding and building programs, be they for CTE or academic, the next question is specifically about recruitment and your ideas about getting students enrolled in the existing programs or some of the new programs that we might develop.
In CTE or overall?
In general.
In general. My background is actually in student recruitment and retention. I have 9 years of experience as a recruiter at the front lines, recruiting for a university at Cal Poly Pomona. I've been a director of student outreach and recruitment at San Jose State. Almost every job I've had, every position has had a focus on enrollment. I dare say I consider myself an expert in enrollment and enrollment management. I use that term carefully. I'm not an enrollment manager, but I'm very comfortable in conversations that focus on strategies to improve enrollment. So I'll share a story with you regarding enrollment. And this is I think it's kind of funny. So one of the courses I taught at Cal State Northridge in the Educational Leadership and Policy program was a course that had to do with finances and enrollment management. I had 20 students in the course, and this is a community college cohort I taught. These are folks who are faculty and administrators and staff working in California community colleges. They're all aspiring to pursue high-level management positions, dean, VP, president positions. So we had a task, we had an assignment, and I asked the 20 folks in the class, representing probably about 18 various community colleges in Southern California, to examine their enrollment management plans for each of their colleges and to determine to what extent they've been effective in improving enrollment. So all the students did their research, they did presentations on their enrollment management plans. And the common theme was that the plans, 100% in all cases, were not being followed. The plans were nice documents, some ranging from 50 to 100 pages. And because of all this great work that was done, the implementation wasn't happening. We do that quite often for accreditation purposes or for other purposes to meet the pressure that we get from external groups to demonstrate that we're doing something about improving enrollment. So I say that because when I think of enrollment management, I'm not sure if that developing a shiny plan that all is going to work. I think what works better is to listen to all of you in the community, to get your feedback in terms of how we can improve enrollment, to listen to our faculty and staff, and to work within our leadership team to try to figure out short-term and long-term strategies to improve the enrollment situation. I shared earlier that when I think of improving enrollment, it's not just a matter of generating more FTE or more dollars for the campus. It's philosophically for me, personal, because having grown up in East Los Angeles, where I saw a lot of young folks not fully fulfill their potential, that really has struck a chord with me in my life. So I believe when we talk about improving or increasing enrollment, it has a lot to do with improving access, because there are many families, whether it's in LA or here, where their exposure to higher education is limited. And if they're exposed to higher ed, they don't feel confident that they're capable of being successful in higher education. So I needed to say that in this context. So I'm interested in working with you to identify short-term strategies. I mean by term, like fall term, spring term, like coming up for fall term 2021. What are the short-term strategies now that we're going to implement, and how much will they cost to try to increase enrollment of our students? And enrollment, by the way, isn't just increasing the number of students enrolled, prospective students. It's also increasing average credit load, increasing the number of credits our students take, and it's also improving our retention rates, because by increasing retention rates, we also improve the enrollment situation. And then for long term, if as a group we want to develop a strategic enrollment management plan, that's fine. But I just want to make sure that that we can implement it. Because if we can't, I really don't want to go in that direction. If we have a long-term strategic enrollment plan, I like to make it short-term and not too long-term. Because there are just so many factors that affect our enrollment situation. Look what happened with that pandemic. No one expected this pandemic. They hit us. And not only that, no one really fully expected that there would be a dearth of high school graduates coming to, or potentially coming to colleges and universities. I mean, we saw the data years ago, but now it's at our doorstep. So when we have these conversations about enrollment, I want to hear from you in terms of what we can do creatively to increase our enrollment. But I want to do it in the context of having short-term and long-term planning and being able to implement these plans with their limited resources.
Thank you, Dr. Villa. The next question is actually coming from me.
Okay.
I really like what you said about it not just being about enrollment and how many students we have and what our headcount and FTE is, but really ensuring that the students are being successful. So my question is around the idea of being a Hispanic serving institution, which UNM-Taos is one, in terms of the federal definition, our Hispanic student population enrollment, Pell eligibility, cost per FTE, all of the definitions that define us as a Hispanic serving institution. There's also been a lot in the national conversation the last couple of years about what does it mean to be Hispanic serving versus just Hispanic enrolling. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts around that concept and what it truly means to be a Hispanic serving institution. And though we certainly are one in our enrollment and headcount, how we can better serve not just Hispanic and Latino students, but all of our students.
Sure. I've been associated with 2 HSI grants at 2 separate community colleges, one at Fresno and the other at Los Angeles Mission College. Let me break that down more when I say associated with, because that's a broad term. At Fresno, I was in working with the team to basically write the proposal, write the HSI proposal. I didn't write it because I already had experience writing for proposals, and being a VP, I wanted to delegate that responsibility to one of my deans. And she did a fantastic job and learned a lot. It was a great professional staff development opportunity for her, but admittedly, I was looking over her shoulder, but not being overbearing in writing this grant. So that's what I mean by associated. And at LA Mission, I was fortunate to catch the wave in which HSI proposal was already approved. So I worked on the implementation of it. In these conversations we had at these 2 campuses, Fresno has about a 60% Hispanic enrollment, and LA Mission about 80%. So we want to know how we're going to steer this funding, because it was significant. As you probably know, HSI funding can be up to about $500,000 to $600,000 a year for up to a 5-year period. We wanted to make sure that the funding would go to serve primarily Hispanic students. And having some experience with HSI grants at other campuses, a lot of the money is being used to improve facilities and to benefit students in general. But we really, and this is a reflection on my philosophy, I really believe that while it's important to improve facilities and to improve departments that serve the general student population, philosophically at these 2 campuses, we poured the money to serve specifically, primarily, not just Hispanic students, but students of color. So what we did at Fresno is we steered the money, we developed a program called Caminos, and we based Caminos in the transfer center. In California, every community college has a funded transfer center, a full-time person who works in the center to help students transfer. The reason for that is because many students of color, especially Hispanic students, don't think that even when they're enrolled at a community college, that they're capable of transferring. So we physically located the Caminos program in the transfer center. The transfer centers, in some cases in community colleges in California, reflect kind of a semi-elitist kind of environment, or if you walk in, it's like, oh, it's a transfer center. Oh, I don't know if I belong here. No, we wanted to dispel that. And we did that at Fresno. And as a result, our transfer rates of Hispanic students over the 5-year grant, because I was there for the full 5 years, improved. It was a cultural issue. It's important to demonstrate to our Hispanic and Native American students that they are capable, that they should have as much opportunity, and they should think of themselves as potential scholars. And that's what we did there. We replicated that model at LA Mission, did the very same thing with the funding. We poured that money to serve the transfer center. And what we did is we created cohorts of students. And I'm a big believer in cohorting. I like what your student support services program does here. I think it's a TRIO program. I believe you have one here. Cohorting matters a lot. I think it works very well. So, and in addition to that, I am used to working with organizations like HACU, Hispanic Association College and Universities. I've been a representative for my community college and working with HACU. I'm interested in pursuing that as an opportunity here at UNM-Taos. And I'm also keenly interested in working with organizations that mentor Hispanic students and faculty and staff. And I'm part of a mentoring program associated with the National Community College Hispanic Council, the NCCHC. And I currently have had about 9 mentees that I work with. One replaced me as a vice president of student services at LA Mission College. I'm very proud that that happened. And most of my mentees have been women, and they're still in my network. And we're working hard to hear them out and try to help them fulfill their fullest potential when it comes to administrative opportunities. So getting back to HSIs and my philosophy, I'm going to be keenly interested in finding out what we can do to expand our funding base by applying for HSI funding. And my bias is to utilize the funding primarily for student services, academic support like tutorial support, or projects like supplemental instruction, or other things to help maximize the success rates of our underrepresented students who happen to be Hispanic or Native American. And then lastly, I'm a keen supporter of onboarding or putting resources at the front end of supporting our students. Imagine this, we have folks here in Taos, and I just heard this today, many families who have children who have not set foot on this campus. That's not unusual to observe that many people don't exactly know where the local community college is located and not set foot on it, and don't fully understand what we have to offer. So I am very supportive of activities in which we work with students who've applied to the college. They help them onboard successfully in the summer prior to enrolling in the fall. And in some cases for our adult students in the winter, in late December or in the November in preparation for beginning enrollment in January. I have been a big supporter in these grants of summer bridge programs. We funded 300 students to go through our summer bridge program at Fresno City College, and our success rate was really high with respect to those students who finished the program. It was close to 100%. And the students who took courses during that summer bridge, it was an 8-week summer bridge, they performed better in college level math and English courses compared to a control group. So many of our folks in our community need that onboarding support before they get connected to everyone in the fall. So I'm a big supporter of using our resources in the summer to help incoming students, especially first generation students who have no knowledge or may not have the confidence level that they need to have to be successful by promoting and actively engaging our faculty and staff in onboarding activities in the summer, funded through HSI or any other funding sources.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Villa. UNM-Taos is a proud member of CAPU, and we actually sent last year, I believe it was 2 students to the Adelante Leadership Institute. So we're very, very involved with
Nice.
CAPU and other national organizations.
Good.
So thank you for that. So the next question is, we have time for, we're about 5 till. We have time for maybe a couple more questions before we close.
Okay.
What do you see as the most pressing issue or challenge being faced by community colleges today? And what do you think the future looks like for higher education?
I want to step back and I've been thinking about this a whole lot. I think the pandemic has done a lot to influence our thinking about what our role is at community colleges in this country and in our local regions. The pandemic, I think, is going to deepen the conversations we're having with regard to online instruction and online support of our students, whether it's counseling or academic tutoring, and so forth. So I think the future of community colleges is shifting primarily, not just because of the pandemic, but because we have to listen carefully to what our local residents need. I was thinking about this, but if you live up in Angel Fire and you want to come down to this campus to take a course or two, I assume that we have online opportunities for folks up there, but I think the pandemic's going to put more of an emphasis on us to think about how we can serve folks in regions that are at a distance from the campus. So I think we're going to see more conversation and more expansion of online support. There's going to be conversation about our employees. And now that we've gotten used to working from home, what are we going to do? Are we going to have everyone come back 5 days a week, or is it going to be a different setup? Is it going to be, I don't know, are we going to be working in an environment where people are going to be working from home more often? But I want to come back to our generation divide that exists in our communities. I think we really have to listen not just to our 18 to 22-year-olds, but our working and underemployed and unemployed folks in trying to meet their needs. So I really wanted to see what we could do to expand to meet their needs in workforce development and in CTE. But we will always have a focus on transfer, no question. So in this whole context, I think the future of community colleges is going to weigh heavily on what the needs are of our folks in the community. So I can't predict exactly what they are, but I think we're going to have more of an emphasis on online and hybrid instruction. And we're going to have more of an emphasis on online support services because our public is going to want that from us. And I think the pandemic triggered that thinking. So I think we're going to move in that direction. And I think that we have to be cognizant of that and adapt. And the last thing is that we can't assume that everybody who wants to enroll at UNM-Taos wants a transfer degree. We're going to probably see an increase in folks interested in CTE or short-term training that will help them get a job.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we'll close with this question. With all the responsibilities of a chancellor, what do you feel is the most important? And with all the opportunities available for leadership in higher education, why UNM-Taos?
I think it's very important as chancellor to represent the branch campus very well. And let me explain. I think it's important for me to be, in my behavior, in my actions, ethical, transparent as much as I can be. I know there'll be some instances where I may have to keep confidences. I think it's important for me to be politically savvy in a way in which I could do everything possible to benefit the residents served by the branch campus. So I think these are important responsibilities that are associated with the position. You have to trust, I think it's important to trust your chancellor to represent this campus, this entity very well in the local community and to be an active, engaged member of the community. That being said, what was the second part to your question?
Why UNM-Taos?
My wife and I have gone over this a number of times, and we've been to Taos at least 4 times, I think, in the last 8 years or so, 8 to 10 years. And every time we come, we're just so impressed with the area. And I know, I said this earlier, I see the area from a tourist perspective. I mentioned earlier that I've been to Ojo Caliente. I've seen the Rio Gorge Bridge. I've been river rafting down the Rio Grande. And I think there's a company practically across the street from the campus in which, what was the name of the company? Billy Bob's or something? Okay, all right. We've been to the Royal Seco Parade, 4th of July Parade. We're enamored with this area. This is a personal decision for our family. And I'll say this in all honesty, I thought that I was going to fulfill my responsibilities as a campus president at Portland Community College Rock Creek. And I was there for 2 years and had a great experience. I have nothing negative to say about the experience, but I feel that was unfulfilled. I feel like I still have in me the strong desire to be in a leadership position like this, in a community that I'm familiar with, in which I have a strong desire to work with all of you to improve our ability to serve the community. And I have a strong affinity for smaller communities. I learned at my experience at PCC Rock Creek that I had a tendency to want to spend a lot of time with smaller rural communities in that job as campus president. So for all those reasons, and look at the beauty of this area. I mean, today was a perfect day for interviewing me and for me to showcase, for it to have this area showcased. I am fascinated by the art, the music, everything that's here. I'm fascinated by the confluence of cultures. I'm extremely interested in Taos Pueblo and our Pueblo communities. Anyway, all that came together, and everything in life is about timing. And for us, the timing is right for us to pursue this opportunity. And I'm hopeful that I end up becoming your next chancellor and able to partake in doing this.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much,
Sure.
Dr. Villa, for taking time with us today. That brings us right to 4 o'clock.
Okay.
It's been a great opportunity to get to know you a little bit better and learn about your experience and interests that would make you a good candidate for the chancellor position at UNM-Taos.
Okay.